Morning, this is Craig with 435 Locals, and I'm here with one of my good friends, Mark Fulcher from Real Estate Essentials. Mark, you've got an interesting program that's kind of unique to the Southern Utah area to help people sell their homes even in a challenging market. Am I right?
That is absolutely
Why
correct,
don't you
man.
tell me a little bit about that?
Perfect, I appreciate it. So basically what we do, Craig, is we sell people's properties, and we call it as an income producing property.
Okay.
And we do that with a contract for deed sale.
So what exactly is a contract for deed sale?
Contract for deed sale, great question. Because what happens is the buyer, let's say there's a seller that wants to sell their property and their buyer wants to buy their property, but they can't get a traditional loan.
Okay.
Okay? So what the seller does is they offer owner financing, so to speak, all right, as an income producing property. How that works is this. Let's look at this. The buyer and the seller on contract at a $700,000 purchase price, okay? And then the seller has a $350,000 loan.
Okay.
Okay, they have a payment, probably sub 4%, right? Maybe $2,500 at the most,
Okay.
with taxes and insurance. So what happens is we bring this buyer along on a contract for deed sale. And a contract for deed sale, what's very important about that is the buyer has ownership interest in the property.
Mm-hmm.
So they can paint walls, they can take advantage of the tax, real estate taxes on their taxes,
Okay.
on their federal taxes and state taxes, the interest on the loan that they're gonna be paying. So they have ownership interest in the property, but they don't have title to the property.
Okay.
Okay, so for example, again, the $700,000 loan, or excuse me, the purchase price, and then the underlying mortgage is $350. That's a difference, right?
Correct.
So that difference becomes money that the seller can get. Now, how they do that? Well, we make sure that the buyer has enough money down payment to be able to stay in the loan, have skin in the game, so to speak, right?
Okay.
So we ask for 15%. 15% of $100,000. Let's say $100,000. New loan $600,000. The rate is probably 6.5%, maybe 6%. Or if you want to go below 6%, we can.
Okay.
It's up to them. The taxes and insurance is a wash. It's always going to be there, right? So what happens is what we do is we set up a payment through an escrow, third-party escrow company.
Okay.
The buyer pays that payment. Let's say it's $3,800. Buyer makes that payment to who? The escrow company.
Okay.
The escrow company does what? They make the underlying
They make the
mortgage
mortgage
at $2,300 to $2,500. The difference goes to
The seller.
the seller every
Right.
month, right?
Okay.
Very important too.
So how do we qualify the potential buyer to make sure they can afford this?
I love it. Great question, because what happened is the team of professionals that we have together, we have a team that's made up of a lender that's been in the industry almost 30 years. I've been in the industry as a real estate agent going on my 31st year. And then a title company that closes the transaction, been in the business 29 years, of which 20 of those we've been doing this type of transactions.
Okay.
So what happens with the lender? Let's say you're the buyer, right? The lender comes along and says, okay, we want to make sure that you can perform when it's time to do it down the road 2 to 5 years, right? When you're going to refinance that new loan out. So what happens is the lender pulls credit, your credit. They look at your income, because some people may or may not be able to qualify for a traditional loan. Why are those reasons? Well, those are the reasons we find out. We want to minimize and mitigate the risk as much as possible to make sure that that buyer will make their payments during the term, because we're going to amortize a loan, their new loan, over 30 years with a 3 to 5 year call.
Okay.
What that means is they're going to have to refinance that. So the lender stays involved for those amount of time every month, making sure the buyer's doing what they need to do to make sure they can do that and perform.
That makes sense. So your team of professionals, if I'm understanding this correctly, it includes a buyer's agent, you have the seller, you have the buyer, you've got a lender, you've got an escrow company and a title company.
Yes,
am I right?
all of us. Yeah. Now I sometimes I can produce the buyers as well.
Okay.
You
So
know,
you
because
could
I
do
could
that.
if I want. If yeah, I've done that before many
Okay.
times.
And when you assemble that team of legal professionals who've been doing this for extensive amount of time, obviously, By combining that, what you're really doing is you're setting it up to where everyone involved is protected legally in every aspect.
Absolutely right. We want to make sure that everyone involved, we're minimizing all the risk, mitigating that risk.
Protects
so
both the seller and the buyer, correct?
Up front in the beginning before it ever goes under contract and closes.
Okay.
We want to make sure that everybody's going to win on this deal.
Cool. So a couple of questions come to mind.
Sure.
And I hope you don't take offense if I ask it.
No, go right ahead.
If I'm buying your house and I default on this loan, what happens to the property?
That's a great question, because let's just say something happens in your life, right? Because we've already vetted you in the beginning.
Yep.
Something happens in your life. We never know that, right? So what happens is this. On a contract for deed sale, remember, the buyer never does what? Take title to the property at the county recorder's office. They do have ownership interest. The county recorder has a notice of interest that's filed that they have an interest in the property.
Okay.
The buyer does. That's all it's filed.
Okay.
Okay? No names or anything, it's just notice of interest, right? So that's very important for the buyer as well. So what happens, you don't make your payment. Unfortunately, it could be because something happens in your life. We don't know that. But what we find out, it can be, this whole deal can get renegotiated if we want to. If the seller and the buyer wants to renegotiate that deal, they can.
Okay.
It's up to them, right?
But worst case scenario?
Worst case scenario, if you don't, and you don't want to continue, you can't, let's say, for example, then me as the seller or the seller involved can file at 31 days late a forfeiture notice.
Okay.
Which says to you, Craig, what happens is, oh, Craig, 31 days, you're late 30 days. You sure you want to give up everything? Meaning that down payment, all the payments you've made with you're buying down that mortgage, right? A little bit, called you're paying interest and you're doing a little bit of equity principal payment, right? You want to give up all that, and well, unfortunately, you can't.
Okay, so at 31 days, I received this notification, and I'm like, I want to do everything I possibly can. What do I do at that point? Do I need to make up all the payments in arrears, get caught up 100%
Well,
loan?
it could be. Well, let's just say it's only been 30 days.
Okay.
Because we're going to give you that notice in 30 days.
Sure.
Right? And then that's a negotiable deal if we want.
Okay.
But if we don't come to terms, then in another 30 days, 60 days at the most, we hire an eviction attorney to get you out.
Okay.
Unfortunately, you're out.
Okay. I understand. Sometimes, like you said, circumstances like that occur.
Yeah, and okay, that's unfortunate for the buyer.
Of course.
But let's talk about the positives possibly for the seller.
Okay.
What did the seller have? They kept the down payment.
They're still on title.
They're still on title. They've gotten you out in 60 days. They've made all that money in the beginning because of the payments. The difference of the payment is $1,500. Every month you're getting that. I'm getting that as a seller or whoever the seller is.
And that's the income producing portion of this program.
There you go.
Okay.
And so what we call it is income producing because it is an income.
Okay.
And the bottom line is the $700,000, if this goes in, it's 97% success, which we have, guess what? You calculate $1,500 a month over 5 years. That's a figure, right?
That's a decent amount
So
of money
therefore,
that I'm
guess what?
making.
We've sold your home. We sold that home for more than what $700,000 was the original purchase price. Does that make sense?
It does. And so another question that comes to mind, you own the home, I'm buying the home. What do we do about the insurance?
The homeowner's insurance?
Yes.
Oh, that's a great question. I, as a homeowner, keep my policy in place.
Okay.
Because the insurance is very important because the lender wants to know that title to I'm still on title to the property.
Yep.
Okay? Meaning that if they did a random audit and they say, well, let's look at Mark Fulcher's loan on this house that you bought. You don't have title, but I gave up my insurance. Then they're gonna find out what? That I don't have the insurance on that anymore. It's a red flag, so to speak. Make sense? So what happens is we make sure that policy that I have stays in place and you're a named insured on that policy. But also for your protection even more, we ask you to put another policy on there for other reasons.
And I'm assuming that would all be part of the escrow.
Yes, sir.
Paid.
The
Okay.
payment.
So everything is guaranteed. Again, reinforcing the whole protection for everybody involved legally.
That is correct.
Last question that comes to mind to me is what happens if your loan on that piece of property that I'm buying from you becomes due and payable?
I love it. Very good question. And you know what? The only reasons why it would become due and payable, there's two reasons. Non-payment. Now, if you're not making your payment, I'm still going to make my payment.
Because
right?
you don't want to lose the property.
Right. I don't want to lose the property. But the thing is, maybe I don't have enough money to do that. So remember that down payment you gave, $100,000? I might set aside $20,000 of that for that purpose, maybe, right? But the thing is, we want to make sure that you're making that payment. That's why we vet it to you in the beginning.
And so when I'm making my payments, it's going to an escrow account. Escrow is ensuring that that mortgage payment stays current.
That is correct.
And then paying you the difference.
That's correct.
Really
Exactly, there's no risk because we make sure that everybody involved understands every portion of this thing in detail. So they're very comfortable.
Awesome.
And to understand it. That is why we call selling your home as an income producing property.
I love the idea. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me this morning. Again, I'm Craig with 435 Locals. Mark is one of our featured business listings on our website. And if you'd like to know more about this program or get in touch with Mark regarding real estate for any reason whatsoever, go to our site and look up Mark Fulcher and get in contact with him.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.